Going to talk about codependent behaviours and helping you change those. Um, I'm going to get straight into it. It's a long blog this week. I do recognise that. Um, this may be longer than usual, and I apologise. But of course, as I said before, you can watch it in increments and continue on afterwards. So let's get into it. How do we change codependent behaviours? Well, first and foremost, we really need to understand and recognise, am I a codependent? So, a codependent has been defined as someone who has let another's behaviour affect them and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behaviour. So, this is somebody who really likes to control things. And generally, it's around somebody who is an addict. So that's the general. I think most people think codependent and think addict, because that's it's the one place it tends to be seen. Codependency tends to be seen in dysfunctional families, families affected by alcoholism, gambling, drugs, sex addiction, eating disorders. It can also arise for other issues though. I as well like, families affected by mental health issues, poor parenting, child abuse. So the child then develops the codependent habits, trying to keep the other person happy. The people pleasing will come in there. It's not necessarily that you will develop it in childhood. Most people think, there's a long history and you will have developed it in childhood, but it's not necessarily just people who have been raised in dysfunctional families as a child develop codependent habits. You can develop it later on if you go into a relationship with, and it's any relationship. I have to emphasize this: any relationship. It could be that you were married to somebody. It could be one of your own children. It could be a friend. It could be a work colleague or a boss, and they have mental health issues or addiction issues. Is predominantly with people who have addiction. Your relationship with somebody who has addiction issues, that tends to be where we would see it. um there are lots of signs and symptoms of codependency. What I've tried to do is list them out in the blog. Not all of them. What I've listed there is just a handful. But the most common ones we see would be people pleasing, perfectionism, martyrdom, controlling, somebody who is trying to control somebody else, guilt, shame, fear, of course, very much in there. But there are lots and lots of symptoms that indicate that somebody has codependency. And your first step to changing your behavior, to changing anything really, is to recognize, yes, I have codependency issues here. I have got codependency behaviors. And what does that mean for me? So that's your first port of call, really, is to realize and recognize that you have got codependent issues. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So changing behavior, any behavior, can be hard. Particularly deep-seated behavior patterns, and these tend to be codependent behaviors tend to be like that. They tend to be deep-seated within us, patterns within us. It's not impossible to change it. I've met so many people, and I know so many people, including myself, who have changed our codependent habits. And I do talk about, I've talked about myself before, and codependency before. We got to recognize that our own behaviors are made up of regular habits, and sometimes those habits are not good for us. Um, and we'll keep going with them. We'll keep going and keep going, even though we know deep down we know this is not good for us. Something isn't right. That's when we start to wake up. We realize this isn't good, but we'll still keep going with it. And as I said, a lot of codependent habits can really keep us stuck. But we're capable of changing them. We're capable of changing our habits. We're capable of changing our behaviors. But remember, don't try and change too much at the too much too soon. Don't try and take big leaps. As I always say, bring it back to small, bring it back to, you know, steady changes. Because if we try to take a big jump, it's going to only cause us to fail. But if we can do the small and steady and consistent changes, then we're more likely to succeed. Um, and reasons we as codependents can decide that we're going to make that big change. We want an instant change. Most people are oh, I recognize I have a problem, and we'll jump immediately to try and take action, but we're skipping a vital step in between, which is, there's awareness, which is recognizing you have codependent habits in this case, and then there is the middle bit, whereas we accept that this is who we are right now in this moment in time. And when we skip that, then we're being very reactive instead of being proactive. And we have a tendency as codependents to, be people pleasers and perfectionists. And they can keep us pretty stuck. And we forget to recognize that, change takes time. As I said, it takes patience with ourselves. It takes compassion with ourselves, and that therein, is a problem for us, that we're skipping that middle A of awareness, of acceptance, and self-compassion comes into that. And also, it can be very scary to change. It can very scary, can feel very scary to say no at the beginning, because remember, we're people pleasers, and guilt and shame comes into it, and they can make it even harder. So trying to jump into that reactive mode really doesn't do us any favor, because if we can bring it back and just sit for a little while in acceptance of ourselves, the compassion, the patience, and giving ourselves the time to change, that helps with easing the guilt and the shame. It helps with the people pleasing and the perfectionism, and changing it. It helps to slow things down. And if we keep going, and if you are, and I promise you, if you keep going at this, you will learn healthier habits for you. You will then succeed at overcoming your codependent behaviours. Two things I'd say to you here is, if you really feel stuck and you've been stuck for a long time, a support group is very important. Particularly if you're in a relationship, currently in a relationship, or have been in a relationship, in any capacity at all with an addict, then I recommend the likes of Al-Anon or Gam-Anon or Narcanon, anything like that. They are very, very good programs. They're very good support groups for people, or to go and see a therapist if you need it as well. That's very, very important. So, how can we, other than recognizing, yes, I'm putting our hands up and going, yes, I'm a codependent, I recognize that. What does that mean for me? When you get beyond that point, then you have to be willing to dig deep. You have to be willing to dig into your own thinking and your own behavior, and be willing to recognize that it isn't a one-time thing, that it's something you will have to continuously work on, because it's such a deep, entrenched behavioral pattern, that it is something that you have to keep working at. And as I said, with the boundaries, and an awful lot of this, and this is why I'm doing this blog this week, is because an awful lot of this is tied into boundaries, and our skewed boundaries. And we do tend to have, as codependents, we tend to have skewed boundaries. So one of the first things we would be looking at would be, your pattern of thinking. How am I thinking? And be willing to change, our way of thinking. And also recognizing that we can't change somebody else's thinking or somebody else's behavior. The only person we can change is ourselves, our own thinking, our own behavior. And for many codependents, the heart of their codependent behavior is the thinking that we can control and change others. If only we would do whatever it is, turn ourselves inside out. We've tried everything. I'd say if you are a codependent, you'll know this. and you've admitted to yourself, you'll recognize that, we will do anything and everything to try and control and change others, and it's just impossible. So the second step really to changing codependent behaviour is our willingness ourselves to change and look at our own thinking. And that can be really, really hard for us to actually recognise that, because we often feel that we are not the ones that need the changing. And this is part of our fallacy in our own thinking, our own way our own brain works, is, that we don't believe that we're the ones that need changing. It's them. Where in fact we also need to change too. We need to change. And when we need to turn that spotlight in on ourselves and be willing to recognise this. And then thirdly, we need to recognise we can't change another person. We need to be willing to admit that. So it's not just about our thinking, but being willing to admit that we can't change another person. Again, it can be a sticking point. We think we can change somebody if only we did the right thing, said the right thing, did the right thing. Again, another problem with our thinking there is that so we have to be willing to give that up, to finally let that go and give up that idea of, yes, if I do the right thing, if I say the right thing, I can change them. You can't. Changing codependent behaviours can be as much about changing our thinking. I think it's even more so about what's going on up here and changing our thinking than our actual behaviours. So I think you need to think about that. We need to really think about that one. There will be certain ways we react, and when you're a codependent, you're constantly reacting. So it's more about what's going on up here than it is what you're actually doing. You do need to change your behaviour, but you also, you can get up here right, it makes life so much easier, believe me. Number two then would be about the boundaries. I had brought up the boundaries there a few minutes ago, recognising that we do have skewed boundaries ourselves. So we recognise that our boundaries are skewed with ourselves and with others. And I've talked the last couple of weeks on boundaries, boundary issues, types of boundaries you might need, tips for setting boundaries without guilt, because guilt is a big one. So there's numerous ways we can see our skewed boundaries coming up as codependents. Our people pleasing, acting as like a martyr, that's a big one. Perfectionism, another big one. Denying our feelings, our emotions, our needs, our wants, and of course another big one, enabling other people's bad behaviour. That's all about boundaries, and you can see that codependent behaviour is really about boundary issues as well as everything else. So do go and check out those previous 2 blogs and videos that I did in the last few weeks. Then number 3, I would say to you, is be prepared to turn the spotlight on yourself. I mean, if you've been listening to what I've said in the last few minutes, you realise, this is what you have to do. You have to be willing to actually turn the spotlight in. And as I said, when you're a codependent, it's always about turning the spotlight out and the other person's behaviour and being obsessed with that. But we need to really turn the light inwards and look at ourselves. So it's not just about looking at our thinking, but also it's turning the spotlight in on ourselves to actually look at our behaviours, and being willing to admit, and being willing to get to know ourselves better. We have to get to know ourselves better, because the symptoms of codependency will leave us being so obsessed with the outside and that person that we have let go of who we really are, who we are as a human being. So we have to get to know ourselves better. And that means, admitting our faults and saying, I have these problem behaviours. And that can be really difficult to do. As a human being, it can be really difficult to do. And it takes time and compassion with yourself to do that. But when we're turning the focus in on ourselves, and we're repairing, the damage to ourselves, and we're taking the focus off that person, then it does tend to make the change easier for starters, because you're not obsessing about that person. You're actually starting to obsess about yourself, really, and you're you know you're spending more time on you rather than on them. There are 10 questions to help with this particular exercise in the blog, about this particular topic. I put 10 questions up there that might help you with this exercise, so go have a look at them. But this is where a support group really comes into its own for codependency, and that's why they're so successful, is because it does take time, it does take compassion, and the weekly meetings do help you, really, listening to other people's stories about their behaviours and what they're doing. You don't feel so alone and isolated. It really does help. Number 4 then is all about getting some healthier habits for yourself. So, you're looking at your thinking, and now you're recognizing, I have got problem behaviors and I've got skewed boundaries. Now I need to start filling the holes. Now I need to fill in the time with healthier things to do for myself than the unhealthier, turning that spotlight and obsessing about that other person. Now I need to be filling that in. So it's a kind of a 2-prong approach is what you're doing here. You're looking at yourself, your behaviours and your thinking, but you're also putting in some practical steps. And this is key. You need to start looking after yourself. When I first heard that term, look after yourself, I was, what are you talking about? I didn't know what people were talking about. I hadn't got a clue what they were talking about. And you need to really start putting in some practical steps. So what were those practical steps? And nobody was telling me. Everybody seemed to have them except me, but I didn't know what they were talking about. So, we start to get honest with ourselves, and, we usually notice that some key habits are missing from our lives. So again, I'd say to you, start small. You're going to want to have that, oh, I have to do it now, I have to do it instantly. Resist that. Try and resist that. Because that's that perfectionism trying to come out in you, going, I have to change it all now, instantly, and it has to be perfect or it's useless. And resist that. Try and resist that. So start small, one small change at a time. Because if you do the too quick, or you try to do the instant change, the insta change we should call it, then it only leads to failure, and then that'll bring in a negative cycle, and you're trying to avoid that. You want to encourage yourself. So I go back to basics. You're going to be missing these. You're going to be missing the very basics of self-care. And you have to start looking at the basics of self-care. And I've banged on about this for a long time. And the reason I banged on about it, and I wrote a book about it as well, is because this is what I did to change my own behaviours, with regards to codependency. So, having a strong basic self-care is really a foundation. It's like laying a good foundation in a house, good strong foundation in a house, and that'll help bring stability to your mental and physical health. It's also what I consider the fallback position. When I'm talking with my own clients, I go, this is your fallback position. If you're doing these, and if you're starting to feel off kilter, overwhelmed, the wobble coming in, and you recognize it, check the list. What have I dropped? Because usually when you're off kilter, you're not looking after yourself. You're not looking after your basic needs. And that's what I'm talking about with basic self-care. You're meeting your basic needs. They keep you on an even keel. So try, have a look at those. I've done many blogs and videos on this. And as I said, I've written a book on it. So go have a look at the videos and see, what can I start introducing that's small that I'm not doing. And this is what I mean about turning the focus in on yourself. You've got to really think, well, what am I not doing for myself? Because you're in a better position. If you're looking after you, you're in a much healthier position to look after other people in a healthier way. And therefore, because codependency is not healthy, and it's not a healthy way of looking after somebody. Number 2 on this one would be improving your communication. And this is around looking after yourself, asking for what you want, and again, I'd suggest that you start small here. You need practice. We have not had that practice. We've not had the capacity to ask for what we want, to speak up. And that can be really scary, to actually say no to somebody, or to say, can I have, or this is my opinion. We tend to shove it all down. We tend to shove down our emotions, our feelings, our thinking. So remember using your I statements. And I've done a whole blog, again, I've done a whole blog and a video on improving your communication skills. And part of good communication is knowing that it's okay to stop. And you can use the acronym STOP. You can use that. It's STOP. S is just actually stop. T is to take a breath. O is to observe what's really going on. And, P is to be then proactive, proceed proactively. And really what I talk about, there's 4 questions that you can use that's in the blog to help you with the O part of it. Observe what's really going on, to take that mental step back from somebody and really observe what's going on before you make the commitment, and proceed proactively, which if you proceed proactively, it's in a healthier capacity than allowing your codependency to come up. And this can really help with those people pleasing, perfectionist, martyr symptoms that codependence can have. It is a new habit, so you're going to have to practice it. But, when we can get honest with ourselves, and I've said this in the boundaries video, if we can get honest with ourselves, if we know who we are, if we start to look at what we want to do, then we can be more clear, we can be more honest when we communicate with other people. And it does get easier the more you practice. So practice with people you find positive, practice with complete strangers, somebody at the checkout, somebody, speak up at a meeting, or look at the areas of your life. Where would it be the easiest for me to actually offer an opinion, ask for something, and help yourself practice your new communication skills there. There's a couple more. Learn to share your opinions, as I said, that's part of it, speaking up at meetings and that. But also we need to learn to validate ourselves, validate our emotions in particular, because we're really, really good at shoving down our emotions. And as I said, we might know what our ideas are, or who we are and who are they, the people we're obsessed with. So we don't know our own ideas. We don't know our own emotions, our own opinions, what belongs to us and what actually belongs to other people. And we need to start validating ourselves. We need to start practicing that. And an easy way to do that is, at the end of the day, is to get out a journal, get out a piece of paper. You can do it on your devices, and just do a brain dump for starters. Just get everything out of your head. And then, even very quickly, it's a 5 or 10 minute exercise. What happened today? And what you're doing there is, how did you feel today? What was going on in your head when something arose? If something is still rattling around in your head before you go to bed, write about it. Get it up and out. And this helps in a number of ways. One, it'll help you to validate your emotions and your thoughts. But it'll also allow you to start noticing how you're thinking, and also allow you to notice, well, do I need to change? How do I need to respond differently to others? Because when we notice the thinking and we start to validate them, and we notice our emotions and we start to validate them, we can also begin to change them. We can begin to become more healthy around our thinking, and how we're responding to other people. Remember, and this is a hard one for a codependent to remember, is that you have rights. And I write more detail about all those words. There's a list of rights that you have as a human being, and I write about those in my book. But you do have the right to own your own feelings and thoughts. We tend to be about the other person when we're codependent, all about the other person. So we forget that it's our feelings and our thoughts are just as valid as anybody else, and we forget that. Um, Other habits that you can take up is to take some time now for your own hobbies and interests. Something we lose, when you're obsessed with somebody else, and you're actively living in it, we do tend to lose that. Um, and it's time now to reclaim those. So it's something small, even for yourself. You could do even once a week would be a good way of reclaiming the person that is you. You need to allot time for hobbies and interests. You might even think, oh, I need to take up a part-time job. A lot of people who are codependent, you know, um, may not. They may have given up jobs, and that some people don't. Sometimes, you have full-time jobs. Um, but think about what you want to do, is what I'm saying here. What you're doing here again is you're reducing the time that you have to devote to the codependent behaviours and to that other person. You're now focusing again. When you're focusing on an interest and hobby, you're now focusing on yourself and what you like. Give things a try, and you're spending time. You're switching where you spend your time. So that's going to be important in terms of your recovery. Big one is to learn to trust your gut again. I've done a video on this, trusting your gut again, because this one is a huge one. A trust in ourselves we tend to lose, and the fact is, if you're around addicts or other people that can manipulate you, like a narcissist, they will manipulate, they will invalidate you, they will lie to you, and you begin to question, am I right? They must be right. What's going on? It's vital that you learn to retrust yourself again. You will have lost that ability to trust your gut. Um, so learning to understand your situation and start to take care of yourself will go a long way in helping you to trust your gut instinct again. Again, support groups are vital for this, because this is one place where you will hear an awful lot of honesty, and you do learn to trust yourself, but you also learn to trust other people again. You will, if you're codependent and you're in an active relationship with an addict, or if you're working in or around narcissists or that, you will lose trust in yourself. So these support groups are really there for you, and they are very, very good at helping you redevelop your trust in yourself again and trust in others again. The last point I'd like to make here is that you need a positive support system, and we all need four types of positive supports in our lives: emotional, tangible, informational, and social supports. There's many benefits to this for our mental and physical health, and I've outlined these before. Um, they can be provided by a wide range of people, from positive family members and friends to positive work colleagues to professionals that you might need to tie in with. We need to surround ourselves with these kinds of support. Codependency, as I've said, has been very isolating. I've said this already in this video. It's very isolating. It's a very lonely place, and that is one of the reasons I've been banging on about going into a support group, particularly if you're in a relationship with an addict, or you have a parent who's an addict, or a child who's an addict, or even a work colleague who's an addict. You need to be in a support group where you can get help, or if you feel you need more help, then to go as well to a professional therapist like myself. Depending on your situation with codependency, you could also be suffering from PTSD, stress, depression, anxiety. Very common. Domestic violence can be common too. So please reach out. Please reach out and get support. And that's it. Sorry it's gone on for so long this morning, but as I said, it's a big topic. There's more information. As I said, there's lots of questions there in the blog you might find useful. And I leave it there. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for those who watch live. Thank you for those who watch. A lot of people watch replay here and on YouTube. So thank you, and I will see you all again next week. If you're in Ireland, I hope you're enjoying the long bank holiday weekend that we're having for Paddy's weekend this week, and enjoy your break, and stay safe.